Now that we've done the theory of root bridge elections and we've done some walkthroughs and we've done some lab work, now we're going to talk about changing the election results. And you may think, great, I learned all this and now I got all these commands down. Now we're going to change it. Why are we going to do that? Well, let's talk about that. Let's go a little bit beyond the whiteboard here and talk about why you would want to do that. Because we certainly know these rules by now. We've seen them in theory and in walkthrough and in lab. That a single switch is going to be the root for every VLAN in the network by default. And that switch is not going to be chosen by the most scientific of methods. It's going to be chosen because it has a lower MAC address than every other switch in the network. Now, if you're in a small network, and you've got, one or two switches, obviously got one switch, you wouldn't care because you've only got one switch to be the root. But if you have two switches, you might not care which one's the root. But of course, your larger networks, you could have dozens, you could have 50s, you could have hundreds of switches, and you might want to be a little more deterministic about it. One reason you might want to do that, let's say you have 50 VLANs, and you've got, of course, one switch that is the root for all 50 VLANs. Well, that's not quite a single point of failure in my estimation, because if that switch goes down, yeah, STP is going to recalculate the paths. It's going to have everything up and running again in less than a minute, but still that impacts all of your VLANs. You might want to spread that out a little bit. Take 5 different switches and make them the root for 10 of your VLANs and just spread it out. So if something happens to one of your switches, you can't eliminate risk, but you can minimize it. And that's just what you've done. You've minimized the impact of a switch failure. It doesn't immediately affect all 50 of your VLANs. It affects 10 of them. Another reason is something to do with our Cisco 3-layer switching model. You remember that, of course. We have the access layer, which is the one closest to our end users. We have the distribution layer in the middle, and then the core. Well, maybe some lower powered access switches have become your roots, and you don't want that. Maybe your core switches have become your roots, and you don't want that, because what we're always trying to do is keep everything off the core switches except switching. We don't want them to even have any other responsibilities. So that kind of narrows it down to the distribution layer. Now I want to make this clear. This is not written in stone. There is no rule that says your root bridges must be in the distribution layer. Your company may feel differently, you may feel differently, but it's a good idea to know how to change that and be able to select and say, okay, here's where I want my root switches to be. And we're going to do just that. I'm going to show you 2 different ways to do it actually. And we're going to do this on the live equipment. And I'm going to show you the most popular way first. This is the way I like to do it, and it's the way I see most people doing it. And right now, switch 2 is not the root for VLAN 20. And we know with our lab back the way it was, switch 1 is going to be the root for every VLAN we create. But let's just say that we want to make switch 2 the root for VLAN 20. Let's start digging into iOS help here. Spanning VLAN, of course we have to put the VLAN. And we've got our forward time, hello time, max age, our timers for the spanning tree, then priority and root. It's really easy to say, well, I'm going to change the priority, so that's the command I need. I would strongly recommend, though, that you use the root command, because when you use the root command, what you're actually doing is when you choose primary or secondary, and please note that you do have to choose one of these. Spanning VLAN 20 root by itself is not a legal command. When you put the primary here, the bid is going to be lowered sufficiently so that it will absolutely become the primary in your network for this VLAN. Now, the secondary option can come in. Let's say that you had 2 switches in your distribution layer that you wanted to make your roots. And you could say, okay, on switch 1 over here, I'm going to use the primary command because I want that to be the root switch for all my VLANs. But if that switch goes down for some reason, I want that responsibility to go to switch B. And what happens there, you would just go to switch B and put spanning VLAN 20 root secondary, and it would not take over as the primary unless the primary goes down. So that's a pretty good deal. But right now, we're going to stick with the primary command on this particular switch. And let's see what happens. And just that quickly, this bridges the root. You'll also note that where switch 2 had a root port here a few seconds ago, it now has a designated port because it is the root. It's just that quick. It's just that quick and easy, really. And you just verify it with show spanning VLAN, and you go on your merry way. Let me show you an oddity about that. Also note the priority here. 24,596, that's quite a drop. And of course we know it's going to be 596 because it's 24,576 plus the VLAN ID. But where did that 24,576 come from? You know, you and I did not enter that. We just said, hey, you know, be the primary. So we'll talk about how it got to that number in just a moment. What I wanted to show you about the priority command. Notice that it says bridge priority in increments of 4,096. You do have to put it in that way. If you try to say, okay, I want the priority to be 1, I do like this. You know, it's kind of nice that it gives you all the increments of 4,096 that it could be. You don't have to break out the old calculator or anything like that, or even do it in your head. But yeah, if you do the priority like this, you do have to change it in increments of 4,096. The reasons are way too complex for us to even be going in here, and I don't want to fall asleep, and neither do you. We just need to know that this has to be in increments of 4,096 if you're changing it with the priority command. Again, if you're using the primary or secondary options of the command spanning VLAN 20 root, actually they're not options because you got to put one or the other, but when you choose one of those, the priority is automatically lowered enough for it to take the role that you just set for it. So that is a pretty good deal. Now let's talk about, you know, where the priority came from to begin with. You know, where is STP getting those values from? You know, we're getting the desired effect, but it would be kind of nice to know why it picked 24,576. Well, here's what happens. If the current root bridge's priority is greater than 24,576, that's where the switch will set its priority in order to become the root. So we know switch 1 was still at the default, so switch 2 just looked down and said, okay, that switch 1 is the root, its priority is greater than 24,576, that's where I'm going to set my value. So when you see that, it's a really good tip-off that that command, the spanning VLAN root primary command, was the one used to make that happen. Now, if the current root bridge's priority is less than 24,576, what the switch does, it subtracts 4,096 from the root bridge's priority in order to become the root. If that's not enough, it subtracts another 4,096 for it to become the root. So just a couple good rules there to know. It's stuff we don't think about that often, but it's good stuff to know for the exam. And of course, those commands are very good to know. Again, I personally prefer spanning tree VLAN root because that ensures the priority on the local switch is lowered sufficiently enough for it to become the root. But in Cisco land, it's always a good idea to know both commands. And do keep in mind with spanning tree VLAN priority, you do have to put that priority in bricks of 4,096. That is it for the priority command. Let's move on to the next video. See you there.